Day 11. The sun hadn't even risen yet, and it already felt too late to be alive. The night dragged on like time itself was sick along with the world. Every noise outside felt like footsteps deciding when to finally reach us. The man we found on day 10, the speaker, was finally asleep, but his sleep was restless. His throat still marked by all the attempts to click out sounds he no longer had the strength to make. We left him tied, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear he might repeat the sounds he'd learned, fear he might call whatever had trained him. The woman barely spoke through the morning. Her husband's notebook never left her hands, like holding it was the last thread keeping her sane. "The next point on the map is here," she said, pointing to a blue mark. "The house locked from the inside." I'd seen that note in the notebook. He'd marked it with 3 red circles and written, "Do not enter," but also, "If you do go in ready to see what's left of a mind." And that always sounds worse than it looks. The street that's too quiet. The street leading to the house felt wrong. Not because it was empty, everything here is empty, but because it was clean. Trash stacked in neat piles, broken glass swept to the corners, no bloodstains, no drag marks. It looked like someone had cleaned the street either to hide what had happened or to prepare for what was still coming. She noticed it first. "They've been through here," she said. "The infected?" "No." She pointed at a small footprint in the dirty asphalt, almost child-sized. "Humans." And beside it, a heavy sole print, big boot, probably military. "2 groups or 1?" I asked. "I don't know, but nobody cleans a street by accident." We went on, careful. 2 blocks later, we saw the house. Small, paint peeling, door shut, windows boarded. Curtains on the inside, like no one wanted to see anything or be seen. But the worst detail was the door handle. Twisted from the inside. It hadn't been forced open. It had been slammed shut from within, hard enough to bend the metal. Someone locked themselves in there in pure panic, and never came out. Observation number 24. The worst mark of desperation isn't a broken door. It's a door nobody ever opens again. The house that breathes under the door. We moved closer, step by step. The air smelled of old dust, damp wood, and something else. A faint, acidic note, like old sweat trapped too long. She crouched, leaning close to the gap at the bottom of the door. "There's air coming out," she whispered. "Fresh or heavy?" I asked. She shut her eyes, testing it. "Heavy, no circulation." "So nobody's opened this place in days. Or weeks." I tried the handle, locked solid. Key still inside the lock maybe, or the mechanism dead. Her husband had written, "Do not enter," but he'd gone into worse places. So why was this one so dangerous? "If you want to bail, this is the time," I said. "I don't bail," she answered, voice cold. "He came here, I come too." I wedged the iron bar I'd been carrying since day 2 between the frame and the lock and pushed. The wood groaned, then cracked. The door opened slowly with a rough, waking sound. We went in. 2 layers of silence. Inside was worse than I expected. The living room furniture was arranged almost like a ritual. Chairs turned toward the wall, a TV on its side, curtains tied with cord. Everything was extremely organized. Too organized. On the table, 5 glass cups, all clean, all dry. On the floor, white chalk marks, lines forming circles and squares in strange patterns, like someone had mapped places where they could and couldn't step. "This is," she murmured. "Touch," I said. "A ritual?" "No." I paused. control. In the notebook, he had written, "Some start building patterns just to keep the mind stable. They call them safe zones. They don't work." That was it. Whoever lived here tried to build order to avoid going insane, and failed. I motioned for her to stay close. We crossed the room, weaving through the objects, until a sound floated from the hallway. Not footsteps, not a voice. Breathing. But not steady breathing. Short, long, like someone trying to copy a pattern. We traded glances. "Infected?" she whispered. "Maybe not." Rule number 25. Not every breath belongs to something alive, but every breath belongs to something that still wants to survive. The room of nails and paper. There were 3 doors off the hallway. 2 open, 1 locked. The one the notebook called the worst place in the house. We stepped into the first room. Small. Every wall was covered with torn paper, taped or nailed in place. Drawings, scribbles, phrases written over and over. Some said, "They look through the window even when they're not here. If I breathe slowly, they don't hear. If I copy the sound, they go away. He's on the ceiling." She ran a shaking hand over one of the notes. He saw something," she whispered. "Or heard it," I answered. There were faces drawn too, but not human faces. Eyes too large, mouths too wide, skin too stretched. Among the shapes, one line stood clearer. "Do not answer the low call." She looked at me. Same as in his notebook. He wasn't the only one who knew, I said. The entire room smelled of old fear. Fear soaked into plaster. There was something else, too. A handprint low on the wall, as if the person had slid down it while crying. No body, just absence. The kitchen nobody used. The kitchen looked untouched. Clean dishes, clean pots, everything clean. Too clean. The fridge was empty, shelves empty. Organized desperation. In the notebook her husband had written, "They use cleaning to erase scent." He cleaned to erase his own trail, I murmured. His trail from who? From himself. I glanced toward the hallway. Someone was trying to hide their own smell. She took a slow breath. Like they were getting ready to be hunted. Or to not call what was outside. Inside one pan was a crumpled note. I picked it up. Shaky handwriting. The third door. We stopped in front of the final door. The handle was broken from the inside. Boards nailed across it in a rushed pattern, sealing it tight. She looked at me. "This is it. He wrote about this door. He told us not to go in. And he went. Maybe that's why he died." Silence thickened. Then, without waiting, she took out her knife and started prying out the nails. I helped. When the last board came free, the smell hit us. Warm, wet, organic. The smell of a body that had lived in the dark for too long. We opened the door. The room was empty. Nothing but an old mattress, sweat stains, scratches on the wall, and one object in the center of the floor, a recorder, old, boxy, covered in dust, but with power. She pressed play. The voice that isn't. What came out wasn't a click, wasn't a whistle, wasn't a groan. It was breathing, low, deep, slow. So deep the recorder's body seemed to vibrate with it. Then a voice that sounded human but wasn't. The frequency was wrong, too low, too slow. dragged out in a way no throat should manage. It said something like words, but everything was twisted, stretched, wrong. At the end of the audio, something fell. The sound of an object hitting the floor. Then dragging footsteps. Then silence. She stopped the recorder with a shaking hand. "He was here," she whispered. Her husband. "He listened to this voice." She swallowed hard. "And he didn't come back the same." Observation number 25. Some sounds enter the ear. Others enter the soul. And once they enter the soul, you are never alone again. The signal in the ceiling. While we stood there trying to process it, something hit the ceiling. Twice. Slow. Deliberate. I looked at her. "That's a response," I finished. They heard the audio. A third impact, heavier. We bolted out of the room. The ceiling above the living room creaked. Dust sifted down through cracks. Something was walking over the house, following leftover sound, chemical echo, or whatever this new mutation used. We ran for the back door, vaulted over the low wall just as the heavy footsteps crossed the full length of the roof. On the other side, the street was empty, but the house shook. Inside, the recorder started on its own, no hand pressing play. The audio rolled again. That deep breathing filled the house like it was waking something that had only been sleeping. She yanked my arm. "We need to go now." She snapped the notebook shut. Now I know why he called this place the house that thanks. "Because it thanks?" I asked. "Because it listens." We ran. Behind us, the roof gave way under the weight of something crashing down. We didn't turn around. No reason to. Because the sound that followed wasn't infected. It was something bigger. Rule number 26. Never open the door someone locked from the inside to save their soul. If you open it, you accept the risk of hearing what they heard. What the house left inside us. When we finally found shelter in a tool storage warehouse, I wrote, Day 11. The house had a voice, and the voice wasn't human. The notebook wasn't exaggerating. They train the dead. They train the living. And maybe they're training something that was never supposed to learn. Her husband tried to warn us. The man from the house tried to warn us. Now we're the only ones who've heard the full warning. I closed the notebook. Outside, the wind carried a deep sound, almost like that same low call from the recorder. "They're answering," I murmured. And she spoke the truth I didn't want to admit. They learned how to listen. She drew in a long breath. And now they've learned how to call.